What's going on, guys? Welcome to Light the Lamp, and welcome to my first breakdown of these play-in round matchups. I'm going to be breaking down every single play-in round matchup, and once the playoffs are finally set after these play-in rounds, I'm going to be breaking down every single one of those matchups as well. In these breakdowns, I'm going to be looking at every single team's offense, defense, goaltending, special teams, how they were playing before the break, their current position in the standings, how they played against each other, and at the end of each video, I'm going to be telling you who I think is going to win and in how many games. So without any further ado, let's get started. First, we're going to look at the Canucks, and that's because they're higher in the standings. They're the 7th seed, and the Wild are the 10th seed, but you'll see that the Wild are only 1 point behind in the standings when the break happened. The Canucks played 69 games before the pause. They had 36 wins, 27 losses, and 6 overtime losses, and this was good for 78 points. One thing that kind of worries me is their last 10. When you look at it, they went 4-5-1. And going into playoffs normally, say at the beginning of April, that's definitely not a record in your last 10. That's not a team you're going to look at to make a deep run or anything because they obviously are not playing their best hockey at the right time. But that's just one part of the unknown with all the craziness that's going to be going into this playoffs. We're not sure if this even matters. We're not sure if the last 10 even matters. You have to remember, it's been over 3 months since these games have been played. But if your last 10 does matter in these playoffs, then that definitely favors the Wild. And when you look at the Wild's position in the standings, you can see they played the same amount of games as the Canucks, 69. 35 wins, 27 losses, 7 overtime losses, and this was good for 77 points. But like I mentioned before, the Wild were 7-3 in their last 10. Again, we're not sure if this even matters, but it's just something to keep in mind. And much like how they finished close in the standings, the 3 games they played were all pretty close. The first 2 were in Minnesota, and on January 12th, the Canucks won 4-1. On February 6th, the Wild won 4-2. So the series is now 1-1. And in the third game, the Wild won in a shootout, which obviously won't be happening in the playoffs. So I'm not even going to really consider that when it comes to this playoff matchup. So if you look at it, it's about as close as it can get. They both won 1 game, and in the last game, they went to a shootout. Now, I'm not personally someone that looks at regular season matchups and think that's going to dictate anything in the playoffs, or in this case, the play-in, but it's just something to consider. I like to look at it, and obviously you couldn't even take much from this because they went 1-1 each, and then they went to a shootout, which obviously wouldn't happen in the playoffs, like I've said. First, we're going to look at scoring for the Vancouver Canucks. And as you can see, JT Miller had 72 points and Elias Pettersson had 66. These were their top 2 scores. But one thing I want you to notice is look at their top, 8 scores? Top 8 scores. The oldest one is 27, and then 26, and then it's 24, 23, 23, 22, 21. This is a young team, and I'm not sure exactly how this is going to fare. Again, we're not sure. There's no way to predict this, and we aren't sure if having fresh, young, inexperienced, really, legs is going to have an advantage over older, veteran players that maybe have played a lot more games than these Vancouver Canucks. And speaking of maybe more experienced legs, let's look at the Minnesota Wild. The top 2 scorers are Fiala with 54 points and Ryan Suter with 48. And again, look at the top, for this team, let's look at the top 6. Besides Kevin Fiala, look at those numbers between Kevin Fiala and Luke Kunin. 35 years old, 35, 35, 32, and 30. This team is much older, much more experienced, but again, we're not sure if the younger kids are going to have an advantage over the experienced guys coming out of this break, because this has just never happened before. But even when you look at how you can't really predict which offense is going to play better, you have to give the offensive advantage to the Vancouver Canucks. I think their forwards are much faster, much more skilled. I think they have some young studs that are going to be absolute stars in Quinn Hughes, Brock Besser, Elias Pettersson. Guys like that are going to be really good in this league. And I think this playing round is going to be a really good experience for them to get. Up next, let's look at the defensive units for both teams. I don't really pay attention to the numbers and the rankings and the ratings below the names. I think that's more fantasy related because these pictures are actually from dailyfaceoff.com, which is a website you can use to look at lineups every single day. I think they keep the updated lineups and the line combinations as well throughout the regular season, throughout the playoffs. It's a good tool to have just to look at it, see how the matchups are going to go. But anyway, let's look at this. And at the right, I see more experience. I see Ryan Suter, who's 35 years old. I see Spurgeon, who's played in a bunch of playoff games. They might not have won a bunch, but the guys on the right have played more playoff games than the guys on the left. All except for maybe Edler. He's played in a lot of games. He's 34 years old. He's been in the league about as long as Suter has. But when you look at the overall units, defensively, it's going to have to go to the Minnesota Wild. This is kind of an easy decision. Just when you look at the overall strength, of the Minnesota Wild defensive units when compared to the Vancouver Canucks defensive units. It's just a much better, more cohesive unit. Up next, we have the goaltending for both teams, and Markstrom's going to be the starter in the play-in games. In 43 games played, he's 23-16, and he has 4 overtime/shootout losses. And his save percent is a 918, and his goals against is a 275. The starter for the Wild isn't as cut and dry because Dubnyk does have experience in the playoffs, but Stalock has been playing much better this season. At a 910 save percent, he has a 2.67 goals against average. His record is 20-11-4, and he's been pretty solid in net for the Wild. He hasn't been the greatest. He's definitely been doing better than Dubnyk. Look at Dubnyk's stats: 890 save percentage, 335 goals against average, and he just hasn't been playing well this season. So if I had to guess, it's going to be Stalock in net. But if he doesn't play the best in games 1 and maybe games 2, Dubnyk might get some time. And this was another easy decision. The goaltending advantage has to go to the Canucks. Not only does Markstrom have better numbers than Stalock, but as a unit, Markstrom and Demko have better numbers than Stalock and Dubnyk. The last thing I'm going to look at to compare these two teams is the special teams, because I think the special teams are so important in the playoffs. For the first thing we're going to look at is the power play for the Vancouver Canucks. They are ranked 4th. In 69 games played, they have 57 goals and 236 opportunities, good for 24.7%. That's pretty good. For the power plays defended, which is the penalty kill, 42 goals against and 215 chances for the opposition at 80.5%, and they're ranked 16th. And up next, we're going to look at the Wild's power play and penalty kill. The Wild are 10th ranked, which is pretty good in the power play, 69 games played, 46 goals and 216 opportunities for 21.3%. For power plays defended, which is the penalty kill again, not so good. 25th in the league, 77%. They've given up 47 goals and 200 opportunities. This was another super easy decision. The special teams advantage has to go to the Canucks. The 4th ranked power play, that's amazing. They're going to use that against the 25th ranked penalty kill in the Wild. And I think that's going to be massive in this series. Here's the moment we've all been waiting for after all this analysis. It's my prediction. And I don't think this series is going to be as easy for the winning team as some people may have it. But I have the Vancouver Canucks winning in 5 games. And it being in 5 games, that says the Wild can win this series. I think it's going to go 5. I think the Wild do have a chance to win the series. But the thing is that the Canucks just have too much offensive power, too much power play capabilities. It's just going to be too hard for the Wild to contain those young kids. And I think the Canucks win this series in 5. If you made it to this entire video, thank you so much. If you enjoyed what you saw, even if you're a Wild fan, I'm sorry. Please consider subscribing. It means so much right now. Please leave a like, and I'd love to hear your comments on who you think is going to win this series. And please remember, this is just a subjective video. It's just my opinion entirely and completely. This might not happen. The Wild could sweep them. I don't think that'll happen. But if the Wild win this series, please come back to this video and tell me how big of an idiot you think I am. And again, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe. I'm going to be making one of these for every single play-in round, as well as every single round of the playoffs, all the way up to the Stanley Cup final. So stay tuned for more content. Thank you so much, and have a good day.